Welcome to TOUSSI Talks. I'm your host, Arash TOUSSI, and I am thrilled to be launching this podcast with the one and only Ron Malhotra. Ron is the managing director of Maple Tree Wealth Management, the founder of the Successful Male Movement. He's an accomplished author, international speaker, and he's been featured in Money Magazine, Smart Investor, Entrepreneur, ABC, and more. In this podcast, we discuss Ron's current ventures, the most common barriers to a successful mind state and how to overcome them, how to build lasting wealth, the current economic state, and more. I really enjoyed our conversation, and if I could sum up the biggest takeaway or underlying theme, it would be the almighty concept of we are what we think. You can learn more about Ron at ronmalhotra.com and thesuccessfulmale.com. I hope you enjoy it. This broadcast is brought to you in part by bitcoinbasics.org, helping you get started with Bitcoin. I can hear you fine, and am I coming in through well?
You are, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time on your Monday morning to start the week off with me. Your time is greatly appreciated. Thank you for coming on.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. My Monday mornings tend to be a bit slow now. Actually, we bought a puppy on the weekend, and I'm done with the rushed Monday mornings. About 7 years ago, I changed my whole lifestyle. So Monday mornings are my best mornings. So you got me at a good time.
Okay, fantastic. Well, who better to introduce you than yourself, Ron? Why don't you take it away?
Wow. Okay. When people ask me, most people are intrigued by the stuff that I do because I do a lot of things. But I always say I'm only actually doing one thing, and I teach. I'm a teacher.
Right.
So by spirit, I'm a teacher. And I love nothing more than teaching and empowering people and enabling people. So everything else that I do is just an expression of teaching. So whether I'm consulting or I'm advising or mentoring or training or speaking or coaching, they're all basically forms of teaching. So you can give it a fancy label, but at the end of the day, what really makes me come alive is to see people reach their potential. Everything else are just the ways that I actually get to that point is through the vehicles of mentoring, coaching, training, speaking, and writing.
Right. Fantastic. Fantastic. And I think that's one of the things that attracted you to me was just the innate drive to want to help others and really help them realize their maximum potential, which is really one of my main purposes in life. And I'm thrilled to find like-minded people like yourself. Now, what motivates you, Ron?
I think when we talk about helping people, I don't see myself as helping people. I see myself as enabling people.
Right.
So I'm very passionate about this. It's a very fine line. I want to enable people to be able to do for themselves
Right.
what they need to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what motivates me is how much of human potential is untapped. So we talk about all this, there's so much controversy and there's so much noise around environment degradation, there's climate change, there's everyone talks about all of these problems, but we never sit back and go, what about human resources?
Right.
Because we are the most powerful species on the planet,
Mm-hmm.
and the survival and the thriving of other species depends on what we do, right?
Right.
So I look at the bigger picture and I go, if 95% of human beings can't master health, peace of mind, relationships, money, and meaningful work, what hope do we have that we're going to save the planet? And so everyone's talking about saving the planet and doing this and that. We've got to start with ourselves. We've got to start with ourselves. How can we add any type of value to the world when we haven't achieved mastery ourselves? And what amazes me is, and I say this all the time, technology has evolved. People haven't.
Mm-hmm.
People haven't evolved.
Right.
We have to evolve. It's about time that we evolve, because if we had evolved, I mean, we 250, 300,000 years of history has taught us that wars do not work, discrimination doesn't work, you know, Poverty doesn't work, crime doesn't work, yet we keep doing it.
Right.
And there's a saying, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Right? So
Yeah.
history is the best teacher. I look at history and I go, this is what humans have done wrong. And why don't we learn from that and go, let's create a better life for everybody and let's create a better life for the planet. And when I talk about this, people go, oh, you're just big noting yourself. I go, why? What do you mean? Y- People have become so myopic that they think that just going to work and making a living is what life is about.
Yes.
And they think that what I'm doing is big thinking. It's not big thinking. This is normal thinking, right? This is not big thinking.
I
This is
agree.
how everybody should think. So it's just how we're programmed to think so small. We get up in the morning and we just constantly, from the time we wake up, we are in survival mode.
Hmm.
And a person in survival is not going to get out there and make a difference.
I
And
agree.
first, you got to change the mindset.
I agree. And I think the defining mindsets really is uh, when people uh, believe that um, they. Sorry, I lost my track of thought here. The difference is when we seek naturally we seek security, when in fact we should be really seeking freedom, right? And financial freedom. We have the typical, we all go to our jobs, typical 9 to 5, and that's been ingrained in our minds from childhood to follow a certain decorum, a certain etiquette in life, and go to school, get a secure job. But in fact, that doesn't serve anybody's purpose. When in reality, I couldn't agree with you more. What we really need to be seeking is uh, freedom. And financial freedom is, I think, one of the best ways to get there, First through health and then through finances. Because, of course, health comes first. And, it's funny you touch on the point of us being very still, I like to call it Neanderthalic, We have all this, for example, we have all this food that could feed the world a few times over, yet we still have this problem of world hunger. So that tells me that when people say we're an advanced species, I don't agree. I disagree. We're advanced maybe on a technological standpoint, but the fundamental things that make us who we are, we're so far behind. And, we need more people like yourself who are spreading the gospel, who are spreading the message, and really showing people uh, the maximum potential that they can reach. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think one of the richest resources that we have as human beings is untapped potential.
Yeah, I think we're an advanced species by potential. We're not an advanced species by results. So we've got the potential. We're the most creative species ever. And any human being can decide to live through their animalistic and primitive instincts, which seeks security, um, it seeks entertainment, it seeks consumerism, it's ego based. That's the primitive instinct.
Right.
And then we all have so we've all got it, by the way. So I've got it. I can be competitive, I can be jealous, I can be angry, right? So all of those. In fact, I would even say that that's my natural bent growing up.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, but that doesn't mean that I stay there because it's so easy for me to justify, oh, that's just who I am, right? I could easily say to anybody, look, this is who I am, and that's why this is how God made me. It's an easy justification, right?
I
That's how
agree.
nature's made me.
Yeah.
But over a period of time, I realized we can choose to operate from that primitive instinct. I could choose to remain there. But
Right.
and I realized that there is also another part of us, which is the higher self,
Mm-hmm.
which is the more godly type of person, the person that has more compassion, the person that wants to make a difference, the person that has the ability to think big, the
Right.
person that strives for making a difference. We have the ability to be both at any given point in time. And then we are constantly making choices, right? So at any given point in time, somebody could steal from me at in my work, right? So somebody I could have an employee that steals from me. In that moment, I have a choice. Do I go back into my primitive instincts and react,
Mm-hmm.
or do I operate from my higher self? And so that's a choice I have to make. And every day I have to make that choice.
Of
And
course.
it's not easy because the world is a harsh place sometimes.
I
And
agree.
it knocks you around, right? So you think, my God, I'm justified in feeling this way. Of course we are, right? We
Of
could
course.
our whole lives we could live in anger and we could live feeling like victims.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why it's not easy. But it is absolutely worth it. And that's why throughout the ages, people have talked about achieving self-mastery. Because if you remain in that victim mode, life is tough. It actually gets worse.
I agree.
And I have a natural negative bent, but I can't operate from there because I have to constantly remind myself, and we humans only have this capability called metacognition, which is the ability to observe our own behaviors and our own thinking. We can step outside of us and look at us and go, what am I doing? How am I reacting in this current moment, right? Am I being competitive? Am I being scarcity based? What am I doing at this stage? And so these are choices, right? And I think it's time that I mean, we've never had it so good. You think about it, prior to, I don't know what it was like in the United States, but prior to 1950, only 7% of the Australian population lived past 55.
Wow.
We're only talking about, we're not even talking about, it's less than 100 years ago.
Hmm.
In that time, the cars that we're driving, the normal car that the average person drives, has more technology than the president of the United States did 50 years ago, right?
Right.
So you look at how far we've come: longevity, medical advances, lifestyle, technology, right? We have all of these capabilities. We've never had it so good,
I
yet
agree.
we are so unhappy, and we are so living in like victims, and we're living so much out of fear.
Hmm.
It just doesn't make sense, and it has to come back to mindset. It's all about attitude, how you perceive things.
Hmm.
Our perceptions change, our perceptions drive our behaviors.
Hmm.
So we have to start with the mindset. That's why we talk about mindset. We go, how do you perceive life? You're
Hmm.
always choosing your perspectives, and that's the key.
I agree. I couldn't agree with you more, Ron. It really is about our mindset. And I firmly believe that if you can change how you think, how you prioritize your thinking, and really dissect the act of thinking and how we manipulate information, how we translate information, I believe like that is the core of where change could happen. So my question to you is what do you think two of the biggest psychological roadblocks to a successful mind state might be or have been for you?
Well, I think the first one is desire. I mean, that's Napoleon Hill talked about it. You've got to start with desire. If you have no desire to improve your living conditions, if you have no desire to make a difference,
Mm-hmm.
if you have no desire to change anything around you, no one can help you, right?
Right.
So you got to start with desire. So most people, I mean, sometimes I get attacked for being, because my whole philosophy is around magnification of life, right?
Right.
I'm the more guy. I'm not the less guy. So if
Mm-hmm.
you want to talk about being settling and being comfortable, I don't agree with that philosophy, because I go, hang on. If we had imagine if we had said that to ourselves 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, we would not have the medical advances we do today. We would not have a vaccination for polio. We would not have the ability to be able to fly from one country to another, right? Or for us to be able to speak to our relatives overseas by just, within seconds. Or this conversation that you and I are having. If somebody had said, look, let's just be who we are and we don't need to be any more than we are, we would not be where we are today.
Right.
So I think it's a very misguided idea when people say, oh, you should just be happy and you should be settled. Well, the
Right.
fact is that a satisfied person is not going to cause positive change. It's very simple.
Mm-hmm.
All inventions are born out of dissatisfaction. So we have to stop seeing dissatisfaction as a bad thing. Now, dissatisfaction doesn't mean lack of gratitude. You
Right.
see, the whole challenge is, how do you strive for everything that you want whilst remaining grateful for what you have?
Mm-hmm.
Being grateful for what you have doesn't mean that you don't strive for more. And this is where people get, they get the concepts very confused. So it's all about magnification. So I'm the guy that's always about magnification. So a lot of people will come back to me and they'll attack me and they'll go, but Ron, that's the problem in the world. Everyone wants more. And I go, it's easy for you to say that. Your needs are met. You don't have to worry about sickness. You don't have to worry about your life.
Right.
Somebody else fought for your freedom. Somebody else fought for your longevity. So the work's been done for you. So it's easy for you to now go, you know what? I just want to relax and listen to the birds sing.
Mm-hmm.
But hang on, what did you do to contribute to humanity? So I have this sometimes I get into this debate with people where I go to people, hang on, every single person has a responsibility to progress the human race and progress the world. And it's been said that only 5% of the human population is responsible for all of human progress, whether that's inventions, discoveries, innovations, disruptions, improvements. So what are the 95% is doing? Now, look, now, here, consider this. We have problems with poverty today. We have problems with crime. We have problems with sex trafficking, human trafficking, violence, depression, suicide. Now, here's the thing. Our, how many of those, what percentage of those problems are human problems? 100%,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And would it be fair to assume that all human beings are contributing to those problems?
Right.
So there can be no change at the world level unless people start with themselves first. And so we're not going to fix any of these problems. Young girls are going to continue to be molested and raped.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to get stabbed. There's going to be wars because it starts with the individual. At the end of the day, the society is just a reflection of the individual. We've had numerous governments in Australia in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a saying: a bad government is a bad government. A second bad government is a bad government, but a third bad government is a reflection of a bad public,
That's right.
right?
Right.
So we
Absolutely.
have to start with us. We can't just go, well, somebody else should fix it. We have to fix it.
Absolutely.
And that's where it starts. And to me, the whole indifferent attitude is what is my biggest. I get very dissatisfied and disappointed with people's apathy.
Mm-hmm.
So the first factor with success is you've got to have the desire. You can't be indifferent. And the second one is you've got to believe before you see results.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to believe in people. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to believe in humanity. You've got to have a belief. If you don't believe in that, you're not going to do anything.
Of
If
course.
you're a skeptic, skeptics do not change the world, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with
And
you. Yeah, go ahead.
and it's so easy to be a skeptic, right? It's so easy. People are, oh, I'm skeptical, Ron. Fine, be skeptical. I'm not going to convince you, but you are doing the wrong thing by yourself because you're going to very soon realize it's not hard to be a skeptic. There is no statues that are erected in the name of critics,
Mm-hmm.
right? So get out there and start making a difference rather than just sitting there critiquing everything. And so they're the two biggest things. I think people have to have the desire
Mm-hmm.
and they've got to have the belief. If you bring those two things in, that is the foundation of success.
I agree with you, Ron. And actually, this year has been a very introspective and spiritual year for me. And I think, I've always had this desire and passion to change the world, the monumental task of changing the world. And, I soon was given quite the reality check when I realized that that is the wrong approach. And I came to the understanding myself that really change starts with one, change starts within. And I think one of the greatest things that have helped me evolve and to develop as a person is the idea of vulnerability, the idea that vulnerability is liberty. And ever since I've been more vulnerable in my relationships, more vulnerable in my work, more honest, more raw, more true to myself, I think I've seen the most amount of changes within this year since I have really honed in on that, because I believe that that's the next step I need to take for my maturity. So, what are your thoughts on vulnerability and how it could be the gateway to personal freedom?
Well, vulnerability has become a bit of a buzzword in the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen a lot of people jump on the bandwagon and talk about vulnerability. Vulnerability at its core is just about being transparent. It's about being transparent. It's not about being weak.
Right.
Again, this is we have to apply distinctions in thinking here. So, for example, I will consider I'm open, very transparent about who I am, things that hold me back, my own emotional issues, my own life issues. I'm open about it. I'm transparent about it. I don't hide them. I don't project an image of perfection.
Mm-hmm.
But vulnerability doesn't mean that I go and I start acting weak to start pulling on heartstrings, which is what a lot of people are doing. So vulnerability has become a bit of a strategic act propagated by a lot of marketers. Hey, be vulnerable so you can then start to connect with people more. And effectively, once it becomes a strategy,
Mm-hmm.
it's no longer being authentic, is it?
I
Because you're now
agree.
being vulnerable. You know what I mean? So if I start being vulnerable for the sake of, hey, you will like me more, the
Mm-hmm.
audience is going to like me more if I become vulnerable,
Right.
then am I just being clever? Am I being manipulative? Or am I actually being vulnerable?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I'm not the kind of guy that likes to operate from weakness. I like to operate from strength. It doesn't mean that I'm hiding my weaknesses. I own up to it, but
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to operate from a perspective of strength. That's just who I am.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is being authentic rather than going because everybody's talking about vulnerability. I could talk about rags to riches story. I could talk about my own background and all of that. And I do when it's relevant and there's context behind it, I'll talk about it. But I will not go out of my way to start telling people, hey, look at me, look how I've done it. Because the problem with that is it's become a strategic approach. There's a commercial mindset that is driving that, and people don't see it. So I sometimes I see people being vulnerable, and my question always is, why are they being vulnerable? Is this now the new trend? Gratitude's the new trend. But these things have been around for forever
Of course.
in the Eastern world. This is very much a part of their traditional nature to be vulnerable. In the Western world, we're just starting to wake up to these concepts. But we have to ask ourselves and go, what is my intention behind embracing this particular concept? Am I doing it for the right reasons? Because I realize and I see that this actually is the way to live. Or am I doing it because I think it's going to get me more votes and I'm going to get more, I can pull on people's heartstrings. So I think to me, vulnerability is absolutely important. And it's really about being transparent, because that's when you really start to connect with people. But that also means you got to own up to everything that you're about, right? I don't, people sometimes say to me, why do you engage in arguments with people on social media?
Mhm.
I go, because that's who I am.
Mhm.
I'm not, somebody swings something at me, I need to put things in perspective for them.
Right.
And if they're coming from the wrong place and they're coming from the wrong intent, I'm not keeping quiet, because that is the politically correct thing to do. And that's what's expected. If you're an influencer or you're any type of public figure, it's expected that you play the nice game. But for me, that's not who I am.
Mhm.
I'd rather play the real game than the nice game, right?
Right.
So to me, that's in those moments I'm being vulnerable, because I'm putting myself out there and I'm prepared to have an argument with somebody. Whereas most influencers will go, you know what, just ignore the naysayers.
Mhm.
No, I'm not going to ignore that person, because I don't agree with their perspective, and it's important that I correct them. And if they're coming from the wrong intent, it's also important that I deter them from doing it to somebody else,
Mhm.
right? So
Absolutely.
my perspective is completely different. But I'm being in those moments, I'm being vulnerable and being authentic.
Of course.
You see,
Of course.
but people don't see it like that always.
Yeah, no, they don't. And I do agree with you. It has been a bit of a buzzword lately, and when I was referencing it, I really meant it in more so my mostly I've found it's been most effective in my personal life, in my relationships. I mean, I would have to agree with you. It has been thrown around a little bit too much, and it kind of does seem a little bit gimmicky, but to me, the idea of it is still kind of fresh, and I find that um, with in balance, it's necessary and healthy, but underlying it all, as long as one is authentic, I think that's what matters the most, and I think people can pick up on that. Right? Authenticity is something that we can generally, as human beings, I think, pick up quite naturally. Um,
Yeah, I think overall it's a wonderful trait, but I do see the extremes at times, especially in the men's space.
mhm.
As you know, I'm quite active in the men's space,
Yes.
and there's a whole new movement that has emerged around encouraging men to cry. Fantastic. Okay, I completely get the fact that when you're feeling emotional, you must express yourself. If you're feeling sad, express yourself.
Mhm.
But there's almost this emphasis: we must cry, we must, hold hands and just, and there's almost this. I've actually seen stuff from people saying, "I cried for 5 hours."
Right.
But that's not vulnerability, right? Vulnerability, for as far back as I can remember, I've always been expressive about what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. In those moments, I'm transparent, regardless of the consequences. The once I don't care about the consequences, I'm prepared to express myself. I'm being vulnerable,
Mhm.
right? So and I sometimes think that the pendulum's gone too far, where we're starting to encourage people to be vulnerable, and because there is times when you have to be strong, and then there's times it's okay to be vulnerable.
Of
You
course.
can't be vulnerable all the time. For example, as a public speaker, you can't act out your drama on stage. You can be authentic, you can talk about it, but you can't. People may love you, but they really, at the end of the day, they're not going to find it professional. Same thing in the boardroom, right? If you find that you're having a conversation with somebody and you're starting to feel pressured, you don't break down, because you've got to overcome those things. You've
Mhm.
got to be able to develop the skills. So there's a place for vulnerability, and then there's a place for being able to overcome your feelings, because our feelings don't always tell us the truth. I know that there's a lot of um, there's some people that are saying that, our feelings are the best gauge of what is true.
Mhm.
That is not the case at all. If that was the case, then every time somebody cut me off in traffic and I felt angry, I would think that my feelings are justified, right? Clearly, that's not the case.
No.
So we have to be able to decipher and go, are my feelings being real or are they misleading me?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you succumb to every feeling that you experience,
Mm-hmm.
and you think that in those moments you're being vulnerable and you're doing the right thing, no, you're not, because there is a place sometimes where you have to, and so you have to apply discernment. And I call it distinctions in thinking. When you hear something on social media, it doesn't apply in every context. You have to be wise enough to go, this particular concept applies in these situations, but doesn't apply in these situations.
Of course.
If you just take it as the gospel and start applying it in every situation without context,
Right.
I think then that's where the people get misguided about what these things mean.
I agree. I mean, not everything is a blanket statement, right?
Correct.
Um, Great. So, Ron, as you mentioned before, you are very involved in the male movement, and you have what is called the successful male movement, which I think is fantastic, and it really speaks to me. Can you tell us why it's important to you and some of the main overlying underlying objectives?
Yes, certainly. I think for us, it was looking at the fact that there's a lot of men that are struggling and suffering. So, largely, men have been perpetrators of violence, financial scandals. They've been behind most of the problems in the world. We understand that. But there's a lot of men out there that did not contribute to those problems. And if you look at statistics around violence, substance abuse, suicide, depression, anxiety, they're all on the rise massively.
Mm-hmm.
The women's liberation movement was required because women have been so disadvantaged for so many generations that it was time to give attention to those issues. And I think those issues still deserve attention. But that didn't mean that we ignore men and make them the core problem.
Mm-hmm.
So there was two issues that we identified. Number one was an education system that teaches men how to make a living, but it doesn't teach men how to make a life.
Right.
And the second was an ingrained macho culture, which prevents men from seeking help,
Mm-hmm.
prevents men from developing character, and it prevents men from expressing themselves. A combination of those two issues has resulted in the statistics that we're seeing now. So what we're seeing now is the aftermath, right, of an education system that is not complete.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, the successful male was about bringing gentlemen back. What does it mean to be a gentleman? Because prior to 1950, we saw some of the best examples of leadership in the world. We saw men that were high charactered, they were responsible, but they were charismatic as well. And they had the insight, so they did a lot of inner work, which was just a part of how you grew up and how you were conditioned back in the day. And so when you did the inner work, the outer charisma and personality and attractiveness kind of took care of itself. Now what you see is a lot of emphasis on the outside. Men spend a lot of time at the gym, they get the tattoos done, they spend a lot of money on clothes and fragrances, and they spend a lot of time on learning dating and attraction. So what they're trying to do is fix the outside
Right.
without really correcting the inside. So there's no alignment, there's no purpose, there's no inspiration, right? So you've basically now got a whole generation of men that are struggling to cope with the pressures of real life. And that's why they're killing themselves, or they're curling up in bed, or sometimes because men don't express themselves, the lack of expression becomes anger,
Right.
and then it shows up in the form of violence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can't just keep throwing them in prisons. You can't, that's not going to solve the problem. You can't just, the feminist movement sometimes in some aspects has gone so far to demonize men. That's not going to help either, because all that's going to do is divide the genders.
Mm-hmm.
We want integration between genders. And there was an event that I spoke at, and somebody said to me, "Why are you doing this, Ron? You should be helping women." I said, "Who do you think I'm trying to help?" Right?
All right.
And how can people be so myopic to miss that point? When men become the best version of themselves, you think about a self-empowered man, a man who has achieved self-mastery. That man naturally will become an asset to his family, to his community, to his industry, and to the country that he lives in. It will just naturally happen. And we just don't have enough good examples. I was growing up and I had no great role models to look up to. I knew men that were financially successful. I knew men that were very good with the opposite sex. I knew men that were very good with fitness, but I didn't know a man who had it all. So if they were good in one area, they were lagging in another, right? So if they had the money, they would typically had no influence. They didn't have any meaningful relationships,
Right.
right? They didn't have a great reputation.
Of course.
If they had fitness, they were broke,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it was almost like I couldn't see in my whole life. I thought, do I know a man that has peace of mind,
Mm-hmm.
is aligned with who he is congruent and authentic with who he is,
Mm-hmm.
has financial security, does meaningful work, makes a difference, and has great health? right? And my
Holistic.
whole life I'm thinking holistic.
Yeah.
And I looked around my circles and I thought, I don't know anybody like that. How can I go my whole life and not come across one example of a man that has it all? So the next question was, is it even possible to achieve it all? Is it possible to be a man of honor, of character, of courage, of substance, and of style? So without giving up the style, because sometimes you see men that are very good, right? They're kind-hearted men, but then they don't present well. They don't make an impact. They have no influence, right? And then on the other end of the scale, you find men that are really commercially and financially driven, right? And they look amazing, but they're not nice people sometimes, right? So it was about the integration of the material and the spiritual. It was about the integration of the intellectual and the emotional. It was about what does it mean to be a holistically successful individual, right? And we started with the men's market because we felt that that was we saw the biggest gap there, because women have evolved emotionally a lot more. They connect better, they express better, they're more congruent, they're more aligned. And now statistics are even telling us that when you look at academic scores, you look at the level of affluence, women are rising. And they should, because they have done a lot of work in this space. But men have been left behind. Now, naturally, a lot of men are resistant. So we have to first correct that. And the other issue is there's a lot of men that are now becoming misogynist because they see women as the problem as to why they are where they are. And so these are also misguided beliefs. So the successful male is really looking to correct these issues by bringing the core problem to the forefront, and rather than fixing the symptoms, actually addressing the real problem.
Well, that's beautiful, Ron. I think you have a very important movement happening, and the attention needs to be brought back to men and the role that they play in the feminist movement. As you said, if we can be the best versions of ourselves, then we basically will be a great contributing member to just the human to the human race, you know, both for men and for women. So I want to know, what would you, if you had a single piece of advice to give a young male, just one single piece of advice, what would it be?
You've got to start with the five most important questions in the world. And I've talked about this in a number of occasions. And I said the first question is,
Mm-hmm.
who are you?
Mm-hmm.
You got to know who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who you are is not your name. Who you are is not your occupation. It's not your nationality. It's not your culture. It's not your religion. Because most of those things you didn't pick for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Who you are needs to be defined by your purpose, by your passion,
Mm-hmm.
by your strengths, by your values, by your goals, and by your mission. That's fundamentally the most important question in the world. Second is you got to understand why you're here. You've got to really answer that question. Why are you here? Are you just here so that you get up in the morning, you go to work, you pay the bills, and you do that for 8 years and then you die? Is that why you're here? Or do you think there's perhaps a greater purpose for your existence? I very strongly am convinced that every human being has a greater purpose. None of us are here just to serve ourselves. And the moment we understand that is when we start to tap into our true powers. Third, identify what kind of legacy do you want to leave. You are going to leave a legacy whether you like it or not. It's either going to be a positive legacy, either your life is going to serve as a warning to other people, hey, don't do what that guy did,
Mm-hmm.
or it's going to serve as an example. That's it.
Right.
Most people are forgotten within a few months of dying because they leave no sort of impact. They leave no positive impact. And one of the things when they questioned people on their deathbed was, what's one of your biggest regrets? And one of the biggest regrets that came up was, I wish I had done something that would have outlasted me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have the opportunity as a young male, you have the opportunity to think on those lines,
Right.
right? And
Time
then
is on
ask
your
yourself,
side.
time is on your side,
Yeah.
right? So why are you here? What are you here for? And then ask yourself, am I maximizing my potential?
Mm-hmm.
I use this analogy of, if you have a battery and you're using a battery, you would never toss out that battery until it's all used up.
Mm-hmm.
But human beings, we are so comfortable. We are so accepting of the fact that majority of us don't even tap into a fraction of our potential before we pass.
Right.
I mean, why are we so comfortable with that? Why don't we have this innate obligation almost to be all that we can be?
Mm-hmm.
Because you look at the it's such a waste. Human resources, one human being can cause such an impact, can cause such a positive change. And I just look at the fact that if these look at all the prevailing world problems
Mm-hmm.
and look at the fact that 5% of the world population is responsible for most of human progress, What if you took that 5% and you made them, and you increase that to 10%?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen? You're going to halve the world problems.
Right.
10% of people can halve the world problems.
Yep.
Why don't we have enough people that go beyond themselves
Mm-hmm.
and go, I'm not just here to pay bills?
Mm-hmm.
Because I find it pretty selfish. Some people have said to me, Ron, I think you're a bit greedy. I go, why? Well, that's because you always want more and more and more. And I go, no, you're greedy. And they go, what do you mean? And I go, well, because you only want enough for yourself, right? So it's different perspectives. Like you're being selfish because you're going, I just want a house. I just want a couple of, maybe I just want some money for my retirement and I just want a nice car and I'm happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, no, that's not going to make me happy because if I wanted to retire, I could sell off everything today
Right.
and I could retire.
Right.
But it just would not satisfy me. I would go, no, I want more because if the more I have, the more I have the ability to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
I give you an to give you an example. Some of the stuff that we have done, I have not taken a dollar out of those businesses because for me, the ability to be able to go keep on investing and put thousands and thousands of hours worth of labor without being rewarded is an indication of the fact. First of all, I can do that. That means my financial needs are taken care of. So the fact that I can do that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that I got myself in that position.
Agreed.
Second of all, I'm doing it even though I'm not getting paid
Mm-hmm.
because it's not just about that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know that at some point I'll probably get financially rewarded for that too.
Mm-hmm.
But even if I didn't, it'd be okay,
Of course.
right?
Of course.
So that's the sort of thinking I think we the young men need to understand that they're the pertinent questions in life, and you've got to ask yourself that question. And most men never ask themselves that question. Most men ask themselves, how can I make money?
Mm-hmm.
How can I become better with the opposite sex? And how can I look good?
Mm-hmm.
Which are really superficial answers. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have that mastered, but I'm saying that if you take care of the foundations, that will take care of itself.
Yeah.
The money, the opposite sex, the how you look and how you come across, your personality. Because a man who is naturally confident knows where he's going, know who he is. He's a naturally attractive man.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that, and you can't buy that with money,
No,
right? Because you've earned those stripes.
absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head, Ron. Self-discovery is really probably the most, I think, the most pivotal thing I had to do, and I'm still doing. It's an ongoing process. I don't think it ever ends. But spending the time to figure out who you are, what you like, and what you don't like, I think is really critical. And I think that right now, how young people transition into post secondary schooling, for example, there's a really big problem with that. You have people who aren't of age, in my opinion, to even make that type of decision because they just don't have enough experience of the world. I personally think everyone after high school should not go to university or college. Spend a year or two dabbling in whatever it is that makes you happy. Those 1 or 2 years will probably outpace the previous 5 years of schooling that you may have had. And I think that area needs a lot of attention. Um,
I think you're right, and I agree with you. I don't think people should go straight into tertiary education without achieving a level of self mastery, right? Because you don't even need world skills to make the world better. You've got to start with you. When you work out who you are, you see, when we understand ourselves, we understand people better.
right.
When we understand people better, we connect with people better. When we connect with people better, the world becomes a better place because there's more collaboration, there's more cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why everything has to start with self,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everybody is keen to change their circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody is keen to change themselves. And there's a saying, therefore, they remain bound to their circumstances
Right.
because you cannot change the circumstances first.
Mm-hmm.
The circumstances are what comes after, it's the effect, it is not the cause. The cause is always us,
Mm-hmm.
always. And
Right.
when we understand that, then we know that there is a very it's a precise formula for fixing circumstances. You start with you.
Right.
Because if circumstances were the reason why you ended up where you ended up, then every individual with the same circumstances would have ended up like you. But that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
We see some people with disability that are bedridden for their whole lives, and we see some people with disability that break records at the Olympics,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Same condition, but different circumstances and outcomes.
Right.
What was different was how the event was interpreted
Mm-hmm.
by the individual.
Of course.
And that's why everything starts with perceptions.
Right. I agree. I mean, how you perceive the world, that is your reality. So, in the interest of time, Ron, I'd like to move on to the financial side of things. And given that you are an expert and wealth specialist, I just have a few questions for you. Um, uh, for one, if you could summarize one thing that you believe is the greatest barrier to financial freedom, what would it be?
I think it's apathy. I mean, I always talk about the fact that it is not hard to become wealthy at all.
Mm-hmm.
So statistically, why is it the majority of people fail? It's estimated that 98% of people in the world never achieve $1 million.
Right.
Not that $1 million is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And today, if your net worth is between $1 to $3 million US dollars, you're considered comfortable poor. But to think that 98% of people don't even get to a fraction of that
Right.
has nothing to do with the economic climate,
Mm-hmm.
by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look back at history and you look back at all the major events that have happened in the world, from all the crashes that we've had,
Mm-hmm.
natural disasters, terrorist attacks, everything that you know of, right? Everything that's happened, all the Great Depression, or you look at the world wars. The fact is that the financial markets and the world overall financially has progressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so majority of people haven't.
Mm-hmm.
People have not kept up with the progress that has happened in the space of technology and business.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes down to people's apathy. Nobody becomes wealthy without having a firm intention to become wealthy. That's the first step. Nobody becomes wealthy. And it's been said that if wealth is not in your top 3 or 5 values, you can't become wealthy. And so that's the first issue. You've got to have a firm intention.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're indifferent,
Mm-hmm.
forget it. It ain't happening for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can absolutely bet my bottom dollar. I don't even care if people get angry with me for saying this. And I go, I can absolutely guarantee you're not going anywhere,
Yeah.
because you got to value it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing. At some point, somewhere, you've got to value it. You've got to attach some meaning to it, right? So it may not be for you. And this is the other problem. The second problem is that people have negative associations around wealth.
Mm-hmm.
They automatically assume that if I desire wealth, then I'm a materialistic person.
Right.
They never make a connection between wealth and contribution,
Mm-hmm.
wealth and making a difference, wealth and making an impact. If they start to create positive associations with wealth, then they'll have better reasons to want to create wealth. And look, here's the fact as well. Majority of people won't even have enough money to last them an entire lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know why people are denying wealth when majority of people are going to end up living in poverty in their retirement. I don't think we should be so quick to deny wealth at this point, because it's just it's very premature to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's fair enough if you have a lot of money to last you an entire lifetime, then you can say, well, wealth is not important. But hey, by the way, a good percentage, 60 to 70% of people end up falling back on Social Security at some point in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we, you know, sorry, can you hear something in the background?
No, it's
No?
fine. No, it's very peaceful.
I told you we got
Please be comfortable.
we we got a puppy. I told you we
What
got a
kind of
puppy
puppy is
yesterday.
it
So
anyway?
she's it's a miniature schnauzer.
Ah, okay, cool.
Yeah. So
Very nice.
so she was perfect last night. So she slept all night, and now she's starting to cry. And I was like, oh my god, I hope she doesn't cry.
Okay.
um.
No
So
worries.
we have to start to, number one, value it, and we have to have a firm intention. And second is, you got to produce positive associations. Until those two things happen, we're not going to plan for it, and we're going to constantly blame the government, and we're going to blame the economy. Because one of the things that um, people ask me about is, well, what do you think about the current economic climate? And I go, nothing's changed.
Mm-hmm.
You can go back and you can pick up the newspapers from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. It's the same thing, doom and gloom all the time, because that's what sells. So if it's not the government, if it's not Trump, it's Brexit, or it's bird flu, it's mad cow, or it's some sort of stuff that is always responsible for why things are all going to collapse all around you. But the markets have proven their resilience time and time again, because the human race is very progressive overall.
Mm-hmm.
Even though a small percentage of people are driving the human progress, the fact is overall the human race has progressed from a business, money, and technology perspective. But not everybody is enjoying the benefits of that. And that's because most people are not even in the ring. They're not even in the game. See, if you're employed, you're paying taxes,
Mm-hmm.
and there is money that's being put into your retirement fund just by virtue of those things. You are in the game of money,
Right.
right? You're in the game of money. Now, the question is, do you understand the rules,
Mm-hmm.
or you don't understand the rules?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
If you don't understand the rules, your chances of winning the game are very slim, because you imagine, right? You can take any sport. You can take soccer, you can take cricket, you can take baseball.
mm-hmm.
if no matter how good you are, let's just say you're a fantastic hitter of the ball, you can hit the ball fantastically well, but you don't understand the rules, you're still going to lose.
That's correct.
So it's up to us to understand the rules of the game, because whether we like it or not, we're all in the game. And if you don't master the rules, you're guaranteed to fail. And so that's where it starts, financial education.
Fantastic. Um, what are three things that you believe young people can do to grow their wealth, Ron?
I think the first is, I think if you want to become a financially successful person, you must have an optimistic disposition. Negative people do not become wealthy. I've seen this time and time again, and it's hard to believe, but fact is that if you're a pessimist, you will always find a reason not to plan, not to commit, and not to invest, because there is enough bad news in the world. So you've got to start with an optimistic disposition. If you don't believe in the human race, you don't believe that the technology is going to evolve, you don't believe in the capitalist system, you don't believe that these things are going to improve over a period of time, you're not going to do what it takes. Simple as that. You're just going to sit on the sidelines and you will never master the game, because you're operating from a place of fear. And it's been said, Neil Walsh said that no matter what we think and what we decide, there's always one of two underlying emotions that are behind every decision. It's either the feelings of fear or it's the feelings of love. The sponsoring thought is always one of fear or one of love, always. So if you're not in the markets, you're not investing, you're not optimistic, you're basically operating out of fear. A fearful person does not become financially successful. And even if they become financially successful, they don't get to enjoy why they've got money. They actually miss the point altogether. The whole idea of having money is so you can enjoy money and you can make a contribution, not just to accumulate money and hoard money. That's not a financially successful person, right? So that's the first thing, is to be an optimist. Second is, you must understand that your behaviors and emotions are a far greater predictor of your financial success than your intellect and financial products. That means the ability to think long term, very, very key. One research from Dr. Banfield from Harvard University, 30-year research, he said that the number one predictor of economic and social mobility was long-term orientation, the ability to be able to think 15 years out. So every time you open your wallet, every time you're making a financial decision, you've got to ask yourself, what is the implication of this decision 15 years from now? That's a very, very key quality. Right. So optimism, long-term orientation, and the ability to be able to commit, absolutely key. So nothing in the world of finance that is low risk happens quickly. Nothing happens quickly. Right. But you've got to understand the compound effect. You've got to understand that little incremental improvements over a long period of time create the snowball effect. So if you roll a snowball down from the top of the hill, it doesn't grow very quickly. When it gets to the middle of the hill, it still hasn't grown much. And so a lot of people then go, well, you know what? Stuff this. I'm not doing this. And they pull the plug on the whole thing. Right. What they don't realize is it's only once it gets past the middle of the hill, it starts to pick up momentum. But once it's 3/4 of the way down, it picks up so much momentum that your imagination can't keep up with it. And so most people will never allow it to happen. When they invest, they only invest for a short term. You see it in the real estate market. People get out within 3 to 5 years. Same thing with how long people hold stocks, 3 to 5 years. If you just hold good quality businesses, good quality assets, good quality real estate, whatever it is, for over a long period of time, you are going to get massive traction. But most people never allow themselves to get there. And they blame the markets, they blame the economy, they blame the government, they blame the employer, they blame the industry, but they never realize it's actually them the whole time that's making the wrong decisions.
Right. Fantastic. I couldn't agree with you more, Ron. I don't want to take up any more of your time, as I hear your puppy is crying in the background. Very quickly for us, can you give us your brief opinion on cryptocurrencies?
Look, I think cryptocurrency has a lot of merit from a technology perspective. I personally, you see, at the end of the day, when you're a wealth specialist or an investment specialist, you've got to have a philosophy. Our philosophy is boring money, exciting life, not the other way around. I I find excitement in business. I don't find excitement in investing. Investing should be boring. So what I do is, for me, business is an adventure. Investing is the slow road to wealth. So anything that is kind of not proven and not time tested, to me, falls into the area of speculation. Therefore, I avoid it. The other thing is, I'm not the breed that wants to try and make quick money. I'd rather make money that lasts. And so there's a difference in philosophy. So I will do things that are time tested and proven, and that have repetitively proven themselves, as opposed to something that is based on future opinion. So I think technology-wise, it's fantastic, but I can't not 100% convinced on the potential as an investment at this point.
Okay, fantastic. Fair enough, Ron. I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me this Monday morning. It has been fantastic, Ron. Please tell us where we can learn more about you, where people can visit and learn about Ron Malhotra.
Yes, look, certainly. You can connect me on LinkedIn. So Ron Malhotra. You can connect with me on Facebook. You can go on my website, ronmalhotra.com. If you're an ambitious person who wants more out of life, you'll find that my content and what I stand for, my philosophy is going to resonate with you. If not, then probably not a good idea to connect with me because I'm just going to annoy you. Yeah, thank you so much. And I do apologize. I know that there's a bit of noise in the background. We only got her yesterday. We actually called her Spirit because she's got a lot of she's got so much attitude.
That's
Um,
beautiful. Well, I
so
no, go ahead.
Oh well,
Go
you're
ahead.
gonna on my YouTube channel, which I'm just developing. We're actually starting a show called Magnify Your Life,
Okay.
and so if you happen to be somebody that likes to consume content through videos, you probably see Spirit there as well because actually she's going to come into the studio with me.
Okay, fantastic. Perfect. I'll have those links put down in the description below. And once again, thank you so much, Ron. Good luck with your puppy. And I hope you have a fantastic week.
Thank you so much for having me
Thank
on.
you.